The Soviet Union has suffered one of the worst disasters in the history of nuclear power. Massive quantities of radiation have apparently been released in an accident at the Chernobyl power station in the Ukraine. Many thousands of people live in the vicinity. Moscow admits there have been casualties, and signs are that a big relief operation is underway.
The time is 1:23 a.m. A test goes terribly wrong. Reactor 4 explodes and the sky over northern Ukraine lights up. Within hours, the deadliest nuclear accident in history is underway, and the world is watching in horror as firefighters collapse and radiation spreads across Europe. The Soviet Union is desperate. They have a massive empire that needs electricity cheap and fast. They build a reactor with a fatal design flaw, staff it with undertrained operators, and run a safety test in the middle of the night with backup systems disabled. What could go wrong? Everything. 31 people die within weeks and thousands get sick. 350,000 people are permanently evacuated, and the entire city of Pripyat becomes a ghost town overnight. Except here's the thing, Chernobyl didn't prove that nuclear was dangerous. It proved that using outdated Soviet technology and reactor designs was dangerous. That distinction got lost in the panic, so one failure ended up poisoning public opinion for decades. The most efficient energy source that we have sits on the bench because of something that happened 40 years ago under a government that doesn't exist anymore. The Soviet RBMK 1000 reactor design had a known flaw. Under certain conditions, it can become unstable during a shutdown. Engineers called it a positive void coefficient, which basically means that when a reactor starts to overheat, the physics of the design make it heat up even faster instead of stabilizing. Western reactors don't work this way. They're built with a negative void coefficient, meaning that they naturally slow down when things get hot. It's a fundamental design difference, and Soviet engineers knew about the flaw. They just didn't think that it mattered enough to redesign the whole system. But then you add in the human element. The operators were running a test to see if turbines could provide backup power during a shutdown. They disabled multiple safety systems and violated procedures. One operator even withdrew most of the control rods because the reactor wasn't producing enough power for the test. When the reactor started to surge, they hit it with the emergency shutdown button. That's when things went catastrophic. The control rods of an RBMK reactor had graphite tips, and inserting them initially caused a brief spike in reactivity before they could absorb the neutrons. It's a design quirk that turned the shutdown button into a detonator. The Vienna International Atomic Energy Agency, mouthful right, spent years investigating and concluded that the accident was caused by a combination of design failures and operator errors, not nuclear energy as a concept. But all the public heard was, nuclear reactor explodes, and that was enough. Chernobyl wasn't the only accident that caused the big nuclear downfall. You need to look at the big three. 3 Mile Island happened in 1979 in Pennsylvania. A cooling malfunction led to a partial meltdown. The operators misread the instruments, and the reactor overheated. But what's most important is that the containment building held. Almost no radiation escaped, and no one died. The cleanup took 14 years though, and cost over $1 billion. The US Nuclear Regulatory Commission overhauled operator training, upgraded instrumentation, and required better emergency procedures. Orders for the new reactors stopped almost overnight, and American nuclear expansion basically froze for 30 years. Countries with Soviet-era reactors either shut them down or retrofitted them. But Fukushima in 2011 was different. It wasn't operator error or even a design flaw of the reactor itself. It was a 9.0 earthquake followed by a tsunami that knocked out the backup power. 3 reactors melted down. The containment structures mostly held, but hydrogen explosions damaged the buildings and released radioactive material. Fukushima killed 1 person from radiation exposure. The earthquake and tsunami killed over 18,000 people. The evacuation itself may have caused more deaths than the radiation. The nuclear industry globally started requiring plants to withstand beyond design basis events. These design changes included flood walls, backup generators, and passive cooling systems that greatly reduced the chance of failure. We obsess over nuclear accidents, count every death, and track every cancer diagnosis, while barely noticing the body count from energy sources we use every single day. Coal indirectly kills roughly 800,000 people per year globally from air pollution alone, and we just accept it as is. In the US, ash from burning coal contaminates groundwater near hundreds of disposal sites. The EPA estimates that coal ash contains arsenic, lead, mercury, and even radioactive materials. Coal plants release more radiation into the environment than nuclear plants do during normal operation. The Deepwater Horizon spill in 2010 dumped 210 million gallons of crude into the Gulf of Mexico. The Banqiao Dam failure in China in 1975 killed an estimated 171,000 people when it collapsed during a typhoon. The point isn't that we should abandon these other energy sources, that would be foolish. It's to say that every energy extraction has a price, and we've gotten very comfortable paying that price for fossil fuels because it's so ingrained in our economy. So when someone says nuclear is dangerous, the question should be compared to what? Because right now, the alternative is burning stuff that kills hundreds of thousands of people per year, and we've just accepted that as acceptable collateral damage. And so over the years, reactors and nuclear energy have adapted to not accept any collateral damage. They've evolved because they've had to. Modern reactors are fundamentally different machines than 10, 20, 30 years ago. If a modern design like the AP1000 loses power, the reactor vessel is surrounded by water tanks mounted above it. Gravity pulls the water down, and it cools the vessel by evaporation. The system works even if every operator is asleep and the power grid is gone. Modern reactors use reinforced concrete and steel structures designed to withstand earthquakes and explosions. None of this erases risk entirely, but the gap between a Soviet 1986 reactor design and a 2025 Gen 4 reactor, the gap is enormous. But let's talk about why nuclear energy is worth the hassle in the first place, because if there was another way to boil water and spin a turbine, I wouldn't be making this video. Energy density is a big one. A single uranium fuel pellet about the size of your fingertip contains as much energy as 1 ton of coal, 149 gallons of oil, or 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas. You could power all of your daily needs with a tiny amount of uranium. To generate the same amount of electricity as a single nuclear plant, you'd need thousands of wind turbines or tens of square miles of solar panels. And those only work when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. Nuclear runs 24/7, 365 days a year, and at 90% capacity. Wind is closer to 35%, and solar is around 25%. If you want a stable grid that can handle demand spikes like during the summer day when everyone turns on their AC, you need energy that runs continuously and predictably. Replacing nuclear with renewables alone would require massive overbuilding of wind and solar capacity, and it still wouldn't fully replicate the grid stability that nuclear provides. France gets about 70% of its electricity from nuclear. Their grid is one of the cleanest in Europe, and their per capita carbon emissions from electricity are a fraction of Germany's, which has been investing heavily in renewables, but also burning more coal to compensate for shutting down their nuclear plants. Decarbonizing the grid and nuclear energy are mutually inclusive. You can't have one without the other, and people that are serious about climate concerns that don't humor the nuclear option are lying to themselves or you. There are over 400 nuclear reactors operating worldwide right now, generating around 10% of the global electricity. The technology exists, the fuel is abundant, and the biggest obstacle is political will and public perception. Look at what's happening right now. Germany shut down its last nuclear plants in 2023 as a part of its Energiewende policy. Meanwhile, countries like China, India, and Russia are building dozens of new reactors. They're doing it because they need massive amounts of clean, reliable energy to industrialize without wrecking their already terrible air quality. In the US, we're barely replacing old reactors that are shutting down, and we're losing ground on that front. Every year that we delay building or innovating on reactor designs and nuclear facilities is another year that we're burning fossil fuels and another year that health issues compound. If we're serious about improving America, we can't completely write nuclear off as an option. In fact, it should be at the top of our priority list. But if modern nuclear is safer, more reliable, and cleaner than the other options, why does everyone think it's still a death trap? Because fear sells, and nuclear is really easy to make scary. A nuclear accident is a spectacle. Media coverage of Chernobyl and Fukushima dominated headlines for months, and we still talk about it to this day. This is what risk perception researchers call the availability heuristic. We overestimate the danger of things that are easy to remember and underestimate things that are abstract or more gradual. Plane crashes feel way scarier than car accidents, even though you're way more likely to die driving. And once that fear is established, it's hard to dislodge. A 2019 survey by the Pew Research Center found that 49% of Americans oppose expanding nuclear power. The anti-nuclear movement also has deep roots. A lot of it started as part of the Cold War anti-weapons activism, and nuclear power got lumped in with nuclear bombs. There's also a generational component. The people who protested in the 70s are still around, and the boomer generation are the loudest voice politically speaking. The media narrative on nuclear is slowly shifting, but it's slow. Here's what I'm not saying though. Nuclear is flawless, that we should build thousands of reactors with no oversight, or even that the waste problem is trivial. Those are all issues that need to be addressed. But if we want to stabilize energy prices and keep the lights on while we transition away from fossil fuels, we need some power. Energy efficiency and grid modernization should be a top priority, because America doesn't run on Dunkin', it runs on energy. Unless we're willing to accept rolling blackouts and the slow, gradual death of the American population, nuclear has to be on the table here. France has one of the cleanest grids in the world because they went big on nuclear decades ago. We could do the same, but we're choosing not to. And that's why this technology has to be separated from the politics. It makes no sense that nuclear has kind of turned into this political issue when it really should be bipartisan. And from my perspective, I don't care what the people think. Build these reactors anyway. Build them big, the biggest reactor. Tons of them, we love them. Best reactors in America. Build them. Fund next generation reactors and dump money into our grid to build it out to protect ourselves from external factors, whether it's weather issues or other countries that are constantly trying to hack into our systems. We have to treat nuclear like an engineering problem and not some existential crisis. We've learned so many lessons over the years, and we've improved our methodology and designs of reactors. The question is whether we're willing to move forward and put these into use to improve our country. Anyways, I hope you liked the video. Make sure to drop a nuclear-sized bomb on the like and subscribe button, and comment down below if you have anything to add to this conversation, or if there's any topics you want to see me talk about. Peace.